who you are now is not who you need to be for the rest of your life. So for you to grow as a person, it's really important to recognize that you are allowed to change your identity. That's okay. I want to continue to build, and I was thinking about this through the week, and I want to continue to build on what we've been talking about. We've been talking about strategies to grow. We talked about care plans and putting in a higher ticket care plan. We've been talking about raising the floor of what we're willing to accept and what we're not willing to accept. And today I want to actually kind of expand on this. And today's talking about raising the ceiling. And I think you guys are going to find this very, very enlightening. It's going to be a little different approach than what we normally talk about, but it's going to help you identify areas in your practice and in your life. So, not just your practice, but in your life of where you're struggling and where even subconsciously you're putting on the brakes and creating this level of self-sabotage. And we all do it. And I can recognize times in my practice and in my life where I've done it too. And I'm going to talk about some things, some signs that'll give you an idea of when this is occurring, how to identify it, how to label it, and then how to compartmentalize it and get rid of it. So I think you'll find this very, very enlightening this morning. This is the whole thing when we talk about really getting to the next level in our practice. These are some points that we have to identify of where we're struggling or where we're bottlenecking ourselves. So we create this invisible barrier, and it's based on a book that I've been looking at called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And there's a problem called the upper limit problem. And the definition of the upper limit problem, it's like an internal thermostat. So if you think of a thermostat, you set your thermostat, and for most of you now, I mean, I think the majority of people have these automated thermostats. They're all Wi-Fi and whatnot. And you can actually set the schedule through the week based on the season. And if the temperature lowers down to a certain temperature, the thermostat kicks in and turns on the heat and raises the heat up. And then, of course, in the opposite season, the heat raises up in your house and the thermostat kicks in, turns on the air conditioning to cool things down. Well, we have this internal thermostat that we've set, and it might even be a subconscious thought that when we get to a certain level, this internal thermostat kicks in and it wants to bring us back down into this level of comfort. And we're going to talk about that and help you guys identify when that's happening. So it's this invisible ceiling for how much success, how much love, how much happiness we allow ourselves to experience. So identifying the upper limit in your practice, and this is really how chiropractors turn the temperature down. And so there's a level of what we call self-handicapping. And this is back in 1978. Psychologists named this self-handicapping behavior. And what would happen is that our brains would rather create this familiar problem, like it might be a messy office or a staff conflict, rather than face the unknown of what the next level of success might be. And so that what happens is we sabotage ourselves and we'll put something in there, even if it's completely unnecessary, that's going to stop us from achieving the next level of success. And so here's some common upper limit symptoms in your office. So one is the imposter moment. So you might have this successful event or a huge marketing campaign, and suddenly what happens is you have this influx of patients into your office, your numbers grow, your collections grow, and you convince yourself that this is not you. This is above the level of comfort that you've created or above the systems that you've put in your office to get you to the level that you were at. And now all of a sudden you're above that level and things break down. So you convince yourself you're a fraud, you can't handle the chaos, and therefore you self-sabotage. And it could be something really simple or really minor, but it's something that you do subconsciously that stops that growth and brings you back down to the level where you're at. And we've all experienced that. You might have this growth in your practice, you reach a certain level, and what happens is unless you change the way you look at it and you change who you are, you change the systems around you, eventually what happens is it comes back down. So then there's a friction point. And you might have this record-breaking week in billings, but then you go home, and what happens is you end up picking a fight with your spouse. You pick a fight with your partner over something trivial. You have this conflict, And when you realize that the conflict is so simple, it might be something like how the dishwasher was loaded. It might be something just so trivial, like um, you didn't let the dog out when you were supposed to let the dog out. It's usually something really dumb, but you amplify it into this big conflict because of all the other things that are going on in your life that have got you to this place where you just don't feel that you fit. And so then the next level is the upper limit illness. So you might finally hit the growth goals, and what happens is you immediately get sick. You have this level of sabotage where your body just shuts down. You go into this mode where you're mentally and physically exhausted for whatever reason, and there might be this outer thing that you may feel has caused this, or there's something that gets you to this point where you just can't function the way you were, or you can't bring your energy level to the level you need to maintain the success that you've created in your for your life. So your body says this is too much happiness, this is too much success, it's too much wealth, it's too many patients, it's too many um, great things going on. Let's create a disaster, and literally you create this disaster to balance it out. And then there's something called the pivot trap. And the pivot trap is just as your clinical model starts to flow, right? You start to get some momentum, you start to get some growth, you get the urge to overhaul everything. So everything that you've done to create this level of success, you forget about it and you start to change things. And again, you sabotage it. So you might end up getting a new EHR system. Maybe you have a conflict with your staff. You end up getting rid of a staff or forcing a staff out who really helped create the success. And this is a good one. You quit the coaching that you've received to get you to this level because now your life is so chaotic, you can't handle the chaos that the success has created. And so what happens is you pull the plug on things that actually help to get you there. And we've seen that happen over the years so often. Somebody gets massive success, they quit coaching. Um, and, you might switch marketing companies. You've had great success with a marketing company, but then you have a month where you feel is inferior to the months that helped you grow these massively great months, and you think, okay, I got to pull the plug on my marketing and look for another marketing company. And what happens is your practice goes back down as a result. So you just find a way to avoid actually letting things work. So these are really common things, and everybody goes through them on some level. But it's really trying to identify when they're happening. And this is what we're going to talk about is trying to really identify them and then label them so that you can really recognize what's happening and change it. So the psychology of the safe prison. This is really interesting. And this is what happens is why we mentally pull the emergency brake. So we put the brakes on our growth and on our success. You operate in this level of homeostasis, and you can call it a comfort zone, but it's this homeostasis where you have this balance, and your brain is wired to prefer the familiar over the fulfilling. So you might have these goals for your life or your relationships or things you want to accomplish or you want to do or experience or the growth you want to experience in your practice. And you're living in this life of comfort. So even if this level of comfort means being mildly miserable, so many of us live in this mild state of misery where we're overworked, we're overstressed, our brain still sees that as the safe zone, the comfort zone. And we're reluctant to move out of that or experience new things or reach a new level of goal because we're stuck in this comfort zone, even if this comfort zone is mild misery. Because here's the thing, it's called this identity threat. It affects our identity. So we've attached our identity to the level of success we've created. And for us to reach a new level of success, we actually have to start to recognize that and change our identity. So this is some research from Harvard. A fellow named Robert Keegan shows that we resist change because it threatens our sense of identity. So, if your identity is the hardest working doc in town, you put in the most hours in your practice, you're working 6 days a week, 7 days a week, practice that runs smoothly without you. So think about the opposite of that. A practice that runs smoothly without you, where now you're the CEO in your practice, you're just training and inspiring your team, and your team is doing all the work in your practice. So you actually have a business. So you don't feel needed necessarily. And now here's the thing, you don't feel exhausted anymore, but that still feels like a threat to your value. And this is really common, especially in chiropractic. And that's why a lot of chiropractors, and we've seen this over the years, get burnout. They have relationship problems. There's all kinds of things that break down in their life because they have compartmentalized themselves to this identity of just working too hard and putting the time in, even though they're completely stressed all the time. That's their identity. And the idea, even subconsciously, the idea of changing that identity is a real threat. And then there's something called the amygdala hijack. Now, what's the amygdala? If you remember, your neurology, your amygdala really its main goal is it's a threat detector. So when you take a bold step, like hiring an associate or changing your practice or maybe doing renovations or moving your office, because some of you are in the process of doing these things, your amygdala detects these things as a threat. It lights up and it floods you with all these stress hormones. But what happens is you consciously misinterpret this pain, this growth pain, this this rational decision that you've made to advance your practice or do the things that are going to help you get to the next level. You misinterpret this in your amygdala as growth pain, that this is not safe. This something's going wrong here. And what happens is if you don't recognize that, you start to get into this system of hijacking things. You start to do things to sabotage that success. So, again, these are things to really start to identify. When we talk about this internal thermostat, here are some things that really are going to help you to start to identify this and, again, compartmentalize it so you can consciously get past it. So, how to stop shrinking your life? So, first of all, name the moment. So, affect labeling. So, when you start second guessing a big decision or you start to overanalyze, it might be a conversation with your staff. Maybe it's a text message or an email you got from your staff and you misinterpret it, or maybe it's an email or text message you got from a friend or your spouse or a partner. And what of us, we all start to do this. We start to assume what the words mean on text message or on paper, and we put these emotions into our mind, and this happens all the time. And that's why I think text message communication can be very dangerous. But you start second guessing this big decision, you overanalyze it. It's time to say, okay, that's an upper limit moment. That's a moment that if you don't compartmentalize it, it's going to sabotage, it's going to create sabotage. So the science is that this thing called effect labeling, it calms your amygdala down. So your brain doesn't see it as a threat. So it turns this discomfort, this growth pain, into into something that you recognize instead of a dangerous situation where you start to sabotage. So if you can recognize it, you can say, okay, I can compartmentalize that and I can rationally get past this situation. The second thing is savor the good. So I know for many of you on the line, you are type A people. You get into these different things, like you reach this new goal and you don't really cherish the goal. It's like, oh, great, we saw 400 people this week. That's the first time we've ever seen 400 people. Okay, and immediately what happens is, okay, next week let's aim for 420. So you don't savor the moment. So because we're such high achievers, and I know many of you on this line are very high achievers, what happens is you just move the goalposts the second that you hit the target. So instead, what the book talks about and what I would suggest that you do is start to celebrate these big wins. Start to have this attitude of gratitude where you can really start to recognize the big things that happen. And it doesn't have to be about numbers. It doesn't have to be about collections. It doesn't have to be about, it can be the simplest little thing. Like a patient came in today and gave you a compliment or was very grateful for somebody who referred them in or had this great change in their health because they were under chiropractic care. Celebrate these little things And that is really, really huge. And what I would say is not only for yourself to celebrate them, but share them with your team. That is a huge team building moment when you can celebrate the big wins, because that means all the work that you've been doing as an office, you can then put that together and say, okay, it's made it worth it. Even for that one person who had one change in their health, you celebrate it together, but make it a big deal. And the science, this neuroscientist Rick Hansen, his research shows that when you start to savor these positive experiences for even for a few extra breaths, what happens is there's a change in the neural pathways for joy and confidence, and that then helps you raise your ceiling. So start to savor the good things, and I would even suggest, and this is something that I've practiced, is actually having a journal. When something good happens, you have this attitude of gratitude. You actually write it down. Write down what you're grateful for. Write down one of the big wins. And when you can actually consciously be aware of it and then write it down again, it makes it real. And that's what neurologically helps to strengthen these pathways for joy and confidence. And the next thing the book talks about is update your identity software. So instead of asking continually, how can you achieve more? How can you see more patients? How can you have more vacations? How can you collect more money? Start asking, who do I need to become to stop sabotaging what's already working? And we talk about this often, and we've talked about the fact that, the only order of events that has to happen is the be, do, have. I mean, that's a biblical truth. Be, do, have. So to have the things that you want to have, you need to do the things that are going to get you to that. But to do the things that are going to get you to that, to have the things you want to have, you have to be the person who's going to be able to do those things at a high level to get what you want. So start looking at who you have identified yourself to be. So who do I need to become? And here's the big thing is remember that identity is not fixed. Identity is very flexible. So you're allowed to outgrow the old version of yourself. That might just be a technician. For those of you who are stuck in this mode of what you believe chiropractic is, or who you have to be to your patients, or how much time you have to spend, or how many places you have to adjust, or how much soft tissue you have, or how much you have to talk to them during that office visit, or how much you have to charge them. There's all these things that we've allowed ourselves to believe based on what's been poured into us or our past experiences. Give yourself permission to start to change that identity, because what you do, no matter what level of practice you're at or what level you are in your life with everything else, your relationships, your children, everything, who you are now is not who you need to be for the rest of your life. So, for you to grow as a person, it's really important to recognize that you are allowed to change your identity. That's okay. Um, so, just to kind of summarize this all up, and then I'd love to open it up for comments or anything that you'd like to talk about. The big leap, really, it talks about choosing alignment over belonging. And again, it's The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. That's the book, Choosing Alignment Over Belonging. And the cruel irony is that the upper limit problem doesn't necessarily show up as fear. And this is really important to recognize. The upper limit problem, so the self-sabotage, or you not allowing yourself to enjoy the next level of success or achieve the next level of success, shows up as logic, or it shows up as being responsible. So you give yourself these fallacies in your mind of where you are, and you need to stay there, and you try to give yourself these rational reasons of why you need to stay there. So start to recognize when you're doing that. So you often trade your growth and your expansion and your success for the comfort of belonging to this old role that you're currently in. So again, give yourself permission. So you can't wait for permission to grow. You have to basically just decide to give yourself permission to become somebody different, or become somebody who accepts a different level of rules. And the result of what happens is when you start to raise your limit, you can't unsee it. Like you just once you allow yourself to get there and you experience it, it's there. Like you can't go back to where you were. You can't unsee it. So what happens is you stop pretending to be satisfied being smaller than you are. You've allowed yourself to reach that next level. And here's the closing charge is that if you feel nervous about expanding your practice or your life, that's actually a good sign because it means you're right at the edge. It means you're right at the edge of the next level of growth for yourself. So if you think that there's things that you need to change about yourself or the way that you accept things, that you currently accept things in this comfort zone that you're in, and you're trying to think about maybe it's raising your fees, or maybe it's spending less time with patients, or maybe it's changing your team, or maybe it's doing the modification you need to your office, or maybe it's making changes in your family dynamic. Whatever that is, if you feel nervous about that, that's a good sign because it means you're starting to recognize that change is close. So that again is a really important step to making this next step. So my final thought on this is that realize that the level of success that you have, the ceiling that you've been under, so the best week you've ever had in practice, the most collections you've ever had in a month, where you are now is not real. It's a it's a bar that you've set for yourself. So it's only in your mind. It's completely self-imposed. So once you start to realize that your complete level of success, the income that you've attracted into your life, the relationships you've attracted into your life, and the joy and fulfillment that you've attracted into your life is 100% self-imposed. So once you can start to realize that, you can start asking bigger questions about what is possible for the next level. What's possible for your life? What's possible for your practice? And there's no reason you can't get there, but you just have to start realizing who do I need to become to make that next step. Guys, I hope this helps. I hope that this can help you at least expand your thinking to help you to get to the next level.